Living my bucolic life, free healthy city strife. Horses, chicks, and dogs, they are my neighbors. I cook and sew and spin, and move the horses into the barn. Then time to move them out again. Red barns, green pastures, beautiful white houses. The view I see each day when I arise. This life pleases me, as it is plain to see. I'm living my bucolic life.
Hello everybody, welcome to the next project. This time, this is the second part of this pattern that we did before. And before, what I did was the dress, and I did it out of this like straw yellow kind of color, a home deck fabric, you know. So what I'm going to be doing now is the jacket, but I'm going to be making some changes to it and using lace, which is going to be fun. So let me tip the camera down and I'll show you everything, because with the lace it's easier to show you on the table than lifting it up. So here we go. Alrighty, so this is what the fabric I'm going to be using, which is lace. It's this is actually the right side. If you can see, it's got some cool texture to it, and it has some stretch to it. All right, and also on both selvage edges, it has scalloped edging, and I am going to be using this scalloped edging that's part of the fabric as a design feature in my garment. So here is the pattern as is. What I'm going to be doing is, instead of ending my jacket here, I'm going to be extending it so that it is the same length as my dress. And my dress was actually just a tad shorter than the one on the model there. I made it a little bit shorter, like closer to knee level. So this jacket's going to come all the way down. I am also going to be using my scalloped edging for my hem down here, for my sleeve hems, and I'm going to try to use it up here where the lapel is as the edging that then flips and comes down the front all the way. So that's going to be interesting. So because of that, my construction method is going to be a little bit different, but we are going to be doing some lace sewing and applique techniques. So what I am going to be doing then, these are the pieces here. I'm going to have to be extending this front, what are they calling this? They're calling this the front facing piece. I'll have to extend this one, and this one, so that it is the same length as my dress made previously. I am not putting pockets into this jacket because it's lace and it's stretch and it's extremely lightweight. I don't want that in there. This is the facing for the jacket. And when I get to that point, I'll tell you what I'm going to do with it, because honestly at this point I haven't decided. So the pieces that I will be cutting out, cut this, pretend this does not exist because we're not doing the pocket. It's going to be the front facing, back, sleeve, and back facing somehow. But when I cut out the sleeve, I'm going to be cutting it so the bottom edge is going along the scallop. Okay? And the same thing with this. Pretend that these are very long. I'm going to be cutting it this way. So what that means is, if my fabric is going this way with my selvages here and here, I'm actually going to be turning my pattern pieces and placing them 90 degrees different than what you standardly have in the layout. So first thing I need to do is get my yellow dress back up here so I can measure the length of that, so that I can know how to extend my pattern pieces. Okay, so the first thing I want to show you is for the sleeve. You can see I have it all folded up in a cuff. I am not doing a cuff because I'm going to have the selvage edge of my lace, the edge of my sleeve. So this point here, which says fold line, is actually going to become the end of my sleeve. And I don't want to cut it off because I might use it at a later time, but I'm just going to fold it up, tape this up here out of the way so that I can use it. And when I'm cutting it out, I will cut this edge along the selvage. All right, so this is the back of my dress here. I have it just on my dress form, and I have this piece pinned up approximately where it would hang. So I can measure how much longer I'm going to need my lace to be. Now my lace is not going to have a hem. The selvage edge is going to be the edge. So the length for my pattern is going to be the actual finished length of my jacket. So I'm going to line this up along my center back. And whatever I measure here, I'm just going to assume it's the same for the front piece and the front facing piece. So from the bottom of this pattern, it looks like I need to add 10.5 inches. So when I go to cut these out, I'm not going to do pattern modification. I will just have it pinned onto my fabric and then measure 10.5 inches, continuing down the fold here, at the same angle here, and everything, just so I can get that look. Because they're pretty rectangular pieces for this one, the front, and the front facing. So what I am doing, because this can be a little bit tricky, is just basically cutting one piece at a time. So I'm cutting off a chunk of my lace, and yes, I have an entire bolt, you know, as you do. I'm just cutting off a chunk for, say, this is going to be my back piece. And I'm going to fold it in half. And what I do for this, I'm basically going to be doing for my front also. And my sleeves, of course, I just cut with my edge on the selvage here. But it's easier for me to handle and manipulate a smaller piece of fabric than trying to lay things out while it's still attached to the larger piece. So here I can see I have my selvage edge pretty level down here. Okay, so I can just put my piece here, move all this stuff out of the way, and I'm going to place my pattern piece. Oh, actually this is the front. That's okay. If this was the back piece, I would just be putting it on the fold, okay? Same type of situation here, it's just the front piece. I want to place it, and I'm trying to move this up so you can see that bottom edge there, so that I have 10.5 inches from here to here. So let me get my tape measure, and I want to follow this same angle, all right? So if I'm following that same angle, 10.5 inches, I need to move it up to right about here. And on this side, 10.5 inches, that's right about there. So now I'm going to go ahead and pin this down, but when it comes time to cut it, I'll put a guide so I can follow that. Okay, so I've got my pattern piece here pinned on. So I'm just going to use a ruler and lay it along this edge here so that it will continue the same down here. Just kind of laying that down. If I was to draw on this, I would probably have to use chalk, but the thing is this lace stretches, okay? So if I draw it with the chalk, there's going to be a tendency for it to want to stretch. So I'm just going to have to pull it really fast, okay? So I don't know if you can see there, but I do have a light chalk mark that I can follow, and I can just continue that up all the way, and I'm just going to cut out this piece, and I will show you what they all look like once they are all cut out. I am saving the selvage edge piece that's at the top of these because I'm going to be using those along the front opening edge. Alrighty, so I have the front, the back, and the two sleeves cut out. I have not dealt with the facings because I wanted to think about it. And I've made a decision. I'm not going to do facings. And this is the reason, okay? This is what the lace looks like just alone with a light colored background. This is what it looks like with a second layer of lace under it. The lace pattern is totally obscured, you know, it just looks like a dark blob. Totally different from this, okay? So the way that this front piece is cut, it will still want to roll over to look kind of like a lapel, but I'm not going to put a double layer because that double layer, it wouldn't just be up here. It would be in, you can see this is anywhere from about 6 inches down to about 5 inches. So it would be a black layer all the way like this, all the way up. And I just don't want that. I want the lace to be the showpiece. So I am not going to be using these. I'm just going to fold them up, put them away, and when it comes time to actually sew this together and get that front piece so it's nicely scalloped, we're going to deal with that a little bit differently. Okay, so I am pretty much going to be improvising a whole lot of steps here, just to let you know. So the first thing is I need to make a pleat back here, all right? And can't really mark too well on this fabric. So the way I'm going to mark it is I measure this, and I can see this pleat line is 2 inches from the edge, and to my mark, which is down here, it is 4 inches down, okay? So I am just going to pull the fabric up there, get one of my little paper tapes here that you usually find in the scrapbooking-ish kind of section. Get a piece about 4 inches long, and I am just going to place it with the edge of my tape along the edge of the line. So I know when I'm going to be stitching it, I'm stitching it along this side of that tape. Okay, I'm not going to mark the other side because I can just look at it over here and pin it. And I have the wrong side up here, okay? My right sides are folded together. So I'm going to very carefully take my paper off, go over to my sewing machine, and sew from down here all the way up. All right, I know this is black on black, so it's going to be difficult to see. Sorry about that in advance. So I'm pulling off my tape here, and when I open up, you know, this is the right side, very textured. I'm going to open this up here, open up my little pleat I just made, and try to center it and press that flat on the back here. That looks pretty even to me. Put a couple pins, and I'm going to go back to my machine. And what they want me to do is come across here to stitch it down and then come back and stay stitch it. I am going to base this down at about 1/4 inch, and then I'm going to come back and fuse some stay tape on it. So let me go ahead and stitch this right here. And I'm trying to be very careful at my machine that I don't stretch it as I go. I want this to be just intact. I don't want to work any stretchy or ease in there. Okay, so over here on my ironing board, this is stitched down. And I'm just going to very lightly press, and just turn my iron on. It's not quite hot, but I will be pressing this just straight down with a little steam just to flatten out that top, just right up here. I'm not going all the way down. What I wanted to show you though, okay, so this is my there you go. That's my stay tape I'm going to use, which I like to use on necklines. And the part that has what looks like a little piece of twill tape or something sewed to it, that part I'm going to try to place at about the 5/8 inch location. Okay, so I really need to get a better source for this stuff because I do love it. So I am just going to be placing it with the fusible side down over here, giving myself about 1/8 of an inch between the edge of my tape So like 1/8 of an inch from this side, 1/8 of an inch out will be the edge of my fabric. So I'm just going to start over here and just gently place it and turn it. The whole point of this is to keep this neckline from stretching. I don't want it to stretch out of shape, especially because I made the decision to omit facings altogether. Okay, so we're going to be doing a couple, hopefully pretty much invisible things to keep it from getting out of whack. So here it is. That's the tape. I'm just going to leave it like that for right now and go on to the next step. Alright, so before we sew the front to the back at the shoulders, I want to show you the strategy I'm going to use for the seams for this. And I'm going to be I just made a little sample here. I'm going to be using my clear elastic. This is about 1/8 of an inch wide. You know, if you have some a little bit wider, that's fine. The great thing about this is it does stretch, but it'll always want to come back to its original size. So if a seam gets stretched, it'll come back, but at the same time I can use it to reinforce the lace. So this is how I'm going to be doing it, especially for my shoulder seam, and I think for my side seams also. You know, why not at this point? And it's invisible from the outside, you know, it's not going to be seen here, but on the inside, what I'll be doing is putting right side to right side and then placing my elastic on top, right where I'm going to be stitching, and just kind of laying it as I stitch and follow it down, okay? So it's going to look like this. And what that will do, hopefully, is if my, say, shoulder seam or something wants to stretch out, it'll come back. And it's just going to give it a little extra reinforcement, because sometimes just sewing lace to lace is not that strong. So that's my plan at this point. So with that said, I'm going to get my front piece and back piece together. Now, remember I did the stay tape along the back neck. I am also going to run that same stay tape, fusing it to the wrong side here, but I'm going to be running it around the neck, and I'm going to run it straight down the edge here. I just think that that might help me have a more defined rolled edge right here. So I'm going to go ahead and do that on the wrong side, put my stay tape here and here, and then I will sew my seams. Alright, so this is my back piece here. I'm just laying it, here's my little center pleat. This is one of my shoulders up here. I'm just laying it right side up, and I'm going to take the corresponding piece and put it right side down on top of it. So this is what my front piece looks like right now. This is like that lapel-ish type part that's gonna want to curl over like that. All right, we'll see how that works at this point. But I'm just gonna match up my tops here, pin those carefully, and then I'm gonna take you over to the sewing machine to show you how I put this on. Alrighty, so I just brought this over and I'm going to sew it at a 5/8 inch seam allowance because that's what the pattern called for. And before I start sewing, I'm going to cut a piece of this that's, you know, a few inches longer than what I need, just so I'm not dealing with trying to manipulate that whole roll while I'm working on it. So with my fabric at the 5/8 inch mark, I'm just sliding a piece, the beginning piece of this tape underneath that needle there, okay? Just to move, I'm going to take a couple stitches in back stitches just to hold it in place because it's kind of slippery little stuff. And while this is loose, I'm just going to kind of tentatively put it down where I want it to go and watch my edges. So I'm going along the side. I'm not really stretching this. I mean, if you wanted something gathered, you could stretch it and it would gather it. I don't want it gathered, I just want it held firm. So I'm just gonna hold it nice and taut, but not stretched. Alrighty, here we go. Still getting used to my new motor sound. I think the belt is noisy too. Okay, so I'm getting close to the end. I'm just going to put it down. Okay. So this is what it looks like. You know, it's fine. And I can choose. I'm not going to be serging the edges of this. You can if you want to. I'm not going to. I was actually toying with the idea of pinking them just so that there's not a abrupt line if you see it from the right side. So this is what it looks like on the right side, and you can see the seam allowance there. I'm thinking I might just pink the edge and cut it fairly close to the edge of my elastic tape right there. Okay, so I just got done sewing the other shoulder, and I wanted to point one thing out, is that I am not going to be pressing these seam allowances open. I'm going to be pressing them towards the back, okay? And so just to make sure this is not visible on the right side, you want to put it on the opposite side of where you're pressing your seam allowance. So say, here, I've already actually pinked this one so you can see it. So this is sewn, this is the back, this is the front, this is sewn on the front side because I'm pressing it towards the back, okay? So that when I open this up, if I was to press it towards the front, you know, it's pretty much invisible, but you might be able to see that through the lace. If I press it towards the back, it's going to be underneath and it's not going to be seen. Okay, that's just my finger there. So if you're planning on sewing lace or anything sheer that you're going to be using this technique, what I would say, decide ahead of time which way your seam allowances are going to be pressed and put this on the opposite side. So let me go ahead and pink the other shoulder. I'm going to put this on my dress form and see what it looks like. All right, so I'm doing this mostly just to check the length, and it looks like the length is where I want it to be. I want it to be the same length as the dress, okay? I wanted to point out that she is not supposed to be a jacket that closes all the way up. Even on the pattern envelope, you can kind of see that it's kind of like just a drapey open type jacket thing, okay? But we have these rolled lapel edges, and I didn't want to put the facing on there. So now that I can see exactly where everything's going to line up, I'm kind of happy with this, but I don't want to leave it so that this tape is visible. I want to put selvage edge from my other fabric on there. So I'm going to be trimming that, and I'm actually going to be putting that on and finishing up this whole front side here before I finish sewing up the sides. I think it'll just be a lot easier. So back over here at my table, and what I'm doing is I'm just going to come back and trim off the edge of the fabric outside of my stay tape. That way I have a nice clean edge to start with. Okay, once I have that trimmed all the way around, what I'll be doing is just folding it in and pinning it just with that tape folded under, just like that, okay? Okay, so I have this all trimmed. So up here, this is my neckline here. I'm going to fold that corner in first, and then fold these two sides up to meet it, which is going to give me somewhat of a little mitered corner right there. Okay, so let me go ahead and put my pins in. It doesn't have to be perfect because I am going to be sewing the selvage edge over, but at the same time we want it to be as clean as possible. So I don't know if you can see because black on black, but I have somewhat of a little mitered edge there. So I'm just going to go ahead and continue folding and pinning this edge down, and then I'll go over to my sewing machine and just run a stitch at about 1/4 inch in, all the way down and around the neckline. Alright, so I have cut the selvage edge off of 1.5 yards of lace, so, or a little bit more actually, but that's what I'm going to need. So these two together should go all the way around the neckline and down the front of my jacket. What I'm going to do is sew the ends of these together with the right sides together. Make sure I got my right sides here. I'm just going to sew it straight across here at about 1/4 inch seam allowance, press those two open, and that's going to be my center back. Okay, so let's see if I can do this on camera. What I basically did, and I made a mistake, I want to tell you, sew the wrong sides together, not the right sides together, because it pops out. So I have a very small seam allowance showing here. I just trimmed it so it's really close to where my seam is. It's not going to be visible, but you know, there you go. So what I'm doing is just seeing how much of the selvage I want to peek out to give me the edge that I want. And right now it looks like it's about 1/2 inch. Again, because it is a scalloped selvage, it's not going to be exact, but that's kind of the artistic way of a selvage or of a scallop, that it's, you know, up and down and up and down to the edge of my jacket. And I am pinning it to this underneath part where I folded under, next to my stay tape. Okay, so that around the neck I'm going to have a selvage like that as the edge. When I get here to this corner, I'm just going to kind of fold it and make it work. After I'm done sewing it, I'm going to come back and trim close to my stitching line, so it doesn't matter to me that I have a whole lot of extra stuff here right now. That's okay. So that's going to give you the general look, if you can see. I don't know that I can bring it much closer here, but this is with the selvage edge peeking out. This is without. You know, it's not a huge difference, but I think it's a nice touch. So I'm going to finish pinning this all the way down, and then once I have it pinned on here, you probably can kind of see I have a row of stitching there where I stitched it down when I turned it under. I'm just going to re-stitch it about at that same 1/4 inch seam allowance all the way down here. You know, I kind of like the curved look right there. I know that this is like last minute and everything, but I might round this out a little bit so it looks a little more curved in that corner right here. Yeah, I think that's what I'm going to do. What do you think? I got it all pinned on, and I really like the look of this neckline with it coming in instead of rolling out in a lapel. So I think I'm going to try to, we'll see how, you know, it works out, but I think I'm going to try to wear it so that the neckline stays like this, because I really like the way that looks. I think that's really sharp. So I'm going to go ahead to my sewing machine, put the first row of stitching on, like I said, at about 1/4 inch, and then we'll take it from there. Alright, so I've got that first row of stitching in there. And what I'm going to do now is come back and do a second row just along the edge, because I think with the 2 rows, wish it would focus better, because here it is with 1 row and it's kind of loose, you know, it's on there but it's kind of loose. So I'm going to do a second row right along the edge right here. I can use my edge stitch foot. But I think that that is going to hold it, so it's a lot flatter and it'll hold a lot better. And then after I get that second row put on, then I can come back here on the inside and trim off all of this excess. So this foot has a little springy guide that's going to hold the edge of my little bump right here, 1/16 of an inch from my needle. So I'm just going to set it down and run straight across here. Hold on, I think I'm actually having a problem here because the little blade on my edge stitch foot keeps wanting to snag the lace, which will not work. So I'm going to switch it out and try again with a little narrow foot, which is also good for doing very edge stitchy type of seams. So let's give this one a shot. Oh, that's much better. Okay, so I'm just going to stitch this down all the way here, and I'll show you what it looks like when I get done. So I've got it all sewn on. I think you can probably see my 2 rows of stitching there. So on the inside, I'm going to come back in here. This is the excess from that selvage piece, and you can trim it with regular scissors, and I think I am because the pinks are a little bit too thick. And I'm just going to come in here and try to very carefully trim it right near that row of stitching, like so. So this may take me just a little bit. When it's all done, it's going to look like this on the inside. So on the outside, it'll look like that. Okay? And I think that that is fine. I think all those rows of stitching and that tape is going to give nice support. So hopefully that front will hang nicely. This is the very bottom hem. You can see I have selvage on the bottom, selvage on this side. I'm actually going to trim this little corner so it kind of blends a little bit better. Alrighty, so I've got the front and back over on my dress form, and I need to get started working on sleeves here. So again, very difficult to mark lace. So what I am going to do is take a little piece of my tape and put it at the center dots, because that's what I'm going to need to mark to match up with my shoulder seam. So I can just do that on both sides here. So I got those marked. And then I'm also going to put a piece of tape on the back side, and the back notches are right here. The back notches, there's more of the back than on the front. There's 1 here, 2 here. This is the back. So I am just going to put a piece of tape right in between those 2 back notches on both sides. I did not clip notches into the lace on the front. There's no gathers or anything like that on this jacket, so it's not really that necessary. But then just with those 2 pieces of tape, I've got it marked, so I'm good. I can go ahead and pull my pattern off of my fabric. Just so you can see, I left a little bit of a tab hanging off the outside edge so that when I pull them apart, I can just fold that over and we are good. I'm not going to take these off until after I sew it. And if you do sew over them, it just, the needle and thread, it just works to perforate it so you can still rip it off. So that's no problem. So let me go ahead and get my bodice for the jacket over here, and we'll pin these on. Okay, so here's my shoulder seam. This is the back, this is the front. I'm going to grab a sleeve where right sides together, where if I can match up, you see I have 1 dot in the middle and 1 over to the side. The one to the side is the back one. So I'm going to match the center one up with the shoulder seam here. Get my pins. That one matched up over there, and I'm double checking to make sure I have the back on the back side, and I do. So I'm just going to go ahead and match up this corner to this corner over here, and because everything is stretching here for me, it's just going to fall rather nicely wherever it will. Okay, so I've got it all pinned on. I'm going to sew this just like I did the shoulder seam with my little clear elastic running along the top so that it will just give a little more stability to this seam, okay? Now, I'm thinking in my head right now, where am I going to be pushing these seam allowances? And the jacket kind of has a drop shoulder, so you can see here. What the pattern's going to want you to do is push the seam allowances towards the sleeve, okay? So right here you can see they're going to be pressed towards the sleeve, which means I am going to be putting my clear elastic reinforcement on the bodice side. So when I sew it, I'm actually going to be sewing it this way So I'm going to have my elastic visible here. I'm going to put it straight down there. And I'm going to do that on both sleeves. On both sides, I'll be sewing it with that elastic on the bodice side, not the sleeve side. Okay, so both of my sleeves are sewn on. Here it is. You can go ahead and pull my tape off, and I'm going to trim this up now. And I'm going to trim it just like I did for the shoulder seam with my pinking shears. Just trimming it, to within like 1/8 of an inch of that elastic. So it's going to be like this when everything is said and done. Once I get this trimmed, I'm going to go ahead and press the seam allowances so that they match what is here, which is down towards the sleeve. Okay, at this point, all I need to do is sew up my side seam. And after having the shoulders and this seam put on, I think I'm not going to put the elastic on this one. I don't think it really needs it. I think all the strain will be here and up here. So I'm just going to sew it regularly, but I need to go ahead and match up my seam line here, making sure that my seam allowances are pressed the correct way. Match up my selvage edged hem right here, and the same at the bottom, and then just kind of even everything out in between, pin it, and I will be stitching this again with a straight stitch at 5/8 inch seam allowance here all the way around and down. I'm not going to do any special reinforcing here because it's going to be an open, looser jacket. The sleeves are plenty wide and my fabric has some stretch, so I don't really think I need to do anything super duper right here. Okay, so back over here at my machine, and I sewed the one side. I'm about to start on the other, but what I ran into on sewing the first side is that I was having trouble feeding it. I was having issues, just issues. And so I popped my walking foot on. Let me see if I can raise this up here so you can see. If you're not familiar with what a walking foot is, it looks like this. It has a big old back side. Mine's a little bit rocky there, but that's just the nature of it. But basically what it's going to do is while the feed dogs on the bottom are pulling it, there's going to be a feed system on the top. This is going to be moving to feed it also. So you're going to have it being fed both the top and the bottom at the same time. And for fabrics which are tricky, which are really nappy, which are thick, which are whatever, sometimes a feed dog or a walking foot is the answer. So I am going to be doing that. And just wanted to show you, if you can kind of see, this little thing here, right here, is going to be rocking through and feeding it. I did not have one for the longest time. I had one and it broke. And this machine, my Meister, it does not fit a standard size walking foot. And I tried so many of them. And finally, I bought this one, which I think fits a 𝐥𝐢𝐤𝐞 machine. And my husband took it downstairs with a drill and was able to carve out the presser foot part so that it would fit with my needle. So now I am good for now. But I just wanted to point that out to you, that sometimes the problem is just use a different presser foot. All right, so I've got that seam sewed on both sides and I need to trim it. Again, this is my 5/8 inch seam. I'm going to be trimming it down to about 1/4 inch with my pinking shears. I'm not actually going to be pressing this seam. I don't really think that that's as important because of lace and because I don't have the elastic here, but I'm just going to trim it all the way down just to make it a little bit smaller and a little more tidy. All right, so here it is. I think it turned out lovely. And it's just a very simple, very basic jacket. I do have this pleat back here, if you can see, and that gives it just a little bit of fullness back here, which is nice, but in general it's fairly straight. See, here's the silhouette of it. It's nice. And now remember I was saying it's not going to be coming all the way together in the front. That's okay, but I'm going to tip down the camera and show you it comes exactly to the length that my little yellow dress does. So there you go. Here's my little jacket. You know what? It's actually really, really versatile. I first tried it on with jeans and just a long sleeve t-shirt upstairs, and it looked really cute. But my jeans were dark and my t-shirt was a dark green, so the lace didn't show up very well. So I thought, you know what, I'm gonna go ahead and put it on with my little yellow dress, even though it's only like 5 degrees Fahrenheit out here right now. But it's very cute. I like it, and it moves very easy. There is enough, you know, extra ease built into the pattern that there's nothing binding. And doing it the way I did without any facings made it super lightweight. But if you are doing it out of an opaque fabric, a woven or something, the facings would be fine. And that they just went on the standard way, so that's not a big deal. But I wanted to show you the length. I got the length, the same length as my dress. And the vibe I was kind of going for is like one of those late 60s suits where it was the dress and the long jacket. And yes, usually it was the same fabric, but this is my modern version of it and everything. But I like it. I think it'll work for me. I hope you liked the video, got something out of it, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Living my bucolic life, reality city strife. Horses, chicks, and dogs, they are my neighbors. I cook and some spin, and move the horses in to the barn. Then time to move them out again. Red barns, green pastures, beautiful white houses. The view I see each day when I arise. This life pleases me, as it is plain to see. I'm living my bucolic life.